All right, so in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make some things like ears, wings, and horns, as well as textures for your monster pots. So the first one we'll do will be a horn. So I'm going to take some extra clay first. And remember, you do not want your horns to be too skinny, because the skinnier they are, the more fragile they'll be. Just to make a coil here. And start shaping the horn. I can do it more like a ram's horn. If I want it to be more spiraled, I can twist it. I can just do a regular horn that just goes up and out and curved like a half of a banana. I'm just going to do a regular one for right now, but I'm also going to give it a little bit of extra detail as opposed to it just being this shape here. So if you were to take your rib tool or another detail tool, and you can just go around and create little ridges here, just using and rocking that side of the rib, just to give it a little extra as opposed to it just being so smooth. So I like that there. Then, of course, with anything, I'm going to have to score and slip it. So I'm going to cut off what I don't need anymore. I'll attach that over here. So I'm going to score and slip the area of the pot as to where it's going to go. And I'll score and slip the horn itself. Got my slip over here. Got that there. And then I'm going to also blend that horn. So remember, don't just think that the slip is going to hold it the whole time. You want to blend the clay into the piece as well. So I'm taking that edge of the horn and pressing it into the pot. Now, this horn does look like it's already attached and it will be good once it gets fired. However, I also want it to look like it's going to grow out of wherever I've placed this horn, as opposed to just being right on top of the surface. Kind of like a deer, like around the base of the deer's horn, you'll see that it's growing out of its head, like it's emerging. Because right now, it just looks like this, which is okay. It works. That might be part of your design. But if you're trying to go slightly more realistic in the sense, then what I suggest doing is taking another coil. We'll score and slip this one around the base. Don't forget to score and slip that coil. And then wrap that around. Like this. So right now, it looks a little bit more like it's emerging, but just like we did with the eyes, or the eyelids, I should say, we're going to blend just that bottom portion into the pot. Just clean that up a little bit. You can kind of think of it like a crater, like in a moon, and then a worm is emerging out of it. Like emerging out of the ground, because that earth would be coming around the side of it as well. So something like that gives you a little bit more sense of realness. And right now you're just seeing the color difference because I have two different clays. One's slightly lighter than the other, but you won't notice the difference later. So there's how you would do a horn, and you can do that in any different shapes that you want to. Let's do an ear next. So for an ear, you're going to take a flatter piece of clay. And traditionally, what most students do is they'll just cut out that shape of the ear like so. So say I just needed like a fox ear or something. They cut it like this. Now they tend to leave the edges rough like that with that corner. Ears are going to be thin. Same thing with like leaves or anything that looks thin. You want to create the illusion that it's not as thick as the clay actually is. So what you're going to do is just pinch those side edges to thin out just those corners. Kind of making like an arrowhead. I'm just gonna add a little bit of water, it's kind of dry. And then the other thing with ears is instead of just going straight on like that and just up, that's kind of flat. Ears are meant to catch sound. So we want to curve it in just a little bit to allow it to catch sound. Like so. So this is a bit more real. And instead of just attaching it the edge, we're going to fold a little bit of this clay at the bottom down, or back, I should say. I'm getting some of the paint from my paintbrush in here. It's okay, it'll just burn off later. So I'm gonna create this back fold so that it will be able to connect more with the pot where I'm gonna connect it, because I'm gonna blend that in. So I'll attach that over here. Of course, score and slip. And then blend that back side that we folded. And blend it enough so that you don't end up seeing where those two connected. So we want to make it one whole piece. You're also going to blend inside just a little bit as well, so that they don't come undone. All right, so now you've got an ear that is properly connected. Like that. Okay, and then the other thing I'll show you how to do is a wing. Few of you have wings. If I remember correctly, it's more of a bat wing. So I'm gonna push this aside a little bit. Just like the ear though, I'm going to make it flat first. And for that bat wing, we have more of an area that comes up like that for the top. And then we curve it down like this for the side of the wing. And you tend to create little cutouts, like little arches here. for the base of that wing. Same thing though, we're gonna pinch the side corners to thin it out. So I'd say this is about that 1/4 inch thickness that we're always looking for, but we're creating the illusion that it's thinner than that 1/4 of an inch. And on this, you can then also take your either the rib tool or you can use a detail tool like one of these that you have in your tool bin. So either one of these would work. You could even just use the needle tool. But you typically have a line that comes from that top one here to create that look of that wing. And then, of course, you're going to score and slip it, bend the back just a little bit, or you might even want to wrap it around the whole pot just like that, just to ensure it doesn't come off. It's actually caressing the whole side of the body. Because if you were to put it like this, it will stay. However, you run the risk before firing or even after firing that it could get knocked off and it could come apart. So it's up to you. As long as it's pretty big and not too small, then you should be fine. But otherwise, if you want to be 100% sure and safe, then you can just wrap it around the body like that. And I just spilled some of the water that was in that bowl. Sorry. Okay, so you would attach the same score and slip just like we did the ear. Now I'll talk about some texture. So for textures, you have lots of different things. And a lot of it comes either from carving or from using stamps or using things like stamps. So the first one, let's say I'll do hair because mostly a lot of you would have textures of hair. You can use this curved tool here, which is the detail modeling. And my clay is leather hard. So you'll notice it's pretty stiff. Like if I hold it up like this, it keeps its shape still. So it's not too flimsy. It's a little bit harder. So to do hair, I can use this curved part of this tool, and I can do it where it's just more carved in. I can do small strokes. I can do long strokes. I can keep them divided like that. And if you pay attention to certain animals, you'll notice that hair goes in a specific direction, meaning like around the face, it actually goes away from the nose. So it starts from the nose and then spreads outwards. It might go and curve around the eyes, down in the chin area. It might go more down. So if you pay attention to those, it'll look a bit more natural and make more sense. The other way you can do hair is if you were to score an area. Which actually, this is just a needle, so that could be another version of doing your hair too, like that. Add some slip. And you can create small pieces of hair, like actual hair. So if you were to do this, create little hair follicles, let's say, and you don't have to do the whole pot, maybe just in a few spots. You can then just press that clay into the area and start overlapping. So because I scored it and I'm pressing the clay into the score marks, it should be okay without having to score and slip the rest. So if you start from your bottom and then work your way up, you can start layering on top. So that gives you a more like layered texture. You can even curve them up a little bit if you want to create movement in that hair. And then you just keep doing that. It's a little fluffier. But this one, you're doing every single like follicle. But again, you don't have to do the whole thing. You can do just, certain sections or small parts of it. Or the other way you can do hair is if you were to, again, score an area. Take some slip and really chunk it up. And this one's a little too wet, but if it's more frosting-like, you can start combing it or brushing it with a fork. Like that. If it was more like frosting though, it'll kind of keep its texture and it'll have high peaks and low peaks, like Cool Whip or buttercream frosting like on a cake. This one's just a bit too soft. But I think you get the idea. So you're like combing and brushing the hair in the direction you want. You could even just use the fork itself to then just scratch up and overlap, and that'll give you hair too. So there's 4 different ways of doing hair right there. So this one, we used our detail tool for here. This one we scored first and then added some coils on top and overlapped them starting from the bottom. This one used thicker pieces of slip and we brushed it, so to speak, with the fork. And then this one's just a fork. If you're going for a rocky texture, like, dirt or volcanoes or just earth in general, you can take something as easy as a dried piece of clay that has texture in it, or even just a rock, and you'll just press that into the clay. So you're just stamping it super fast, super easy. I do recommend just kind of like turning it around and overlapping so it doesn't have like the same pattern all the time. So that would be one way. The other way would be score and slip an area. And if you were to take broken, dried pieces of clay, so this was a piece of dried clay that I just broke up into smaller bits. Think of it like sprinkles. I can place that on top like so, push them in, and then just take a damp brush and just ensure they're sticking to that slip. So I'm just sort of blotting the top of it. Once it dries, it'll look really rocky without really having to do anything because we're using the natural breakage of those dried pieces, which gives you really sharp corners and edges to create that texture. So that will give you that rockier texture. When it dries, you'll see it a little bit better. Okay. And then let's do wood. Some of you might have wood. For that, what I like to do is I'll either use my needle tool or I'll use the other side of the detail and just create little knots first, like the knot part of the wood, and do that in several spots, which are just kind of spirals almost. And then from the top, working your way down, you start curving some wood grain that goes around those knots. Like that. And that would give you that wood one. So that's fast. We also have some like wood texture stamps and a few others too over by the pegboard as well. So if you want to use those, you can also look through those silicone stamps and see what you like. And then let's talk about scales. Scales will be the last one. You have several tools that you can do for scales. One would be using a loop tool. So you have this in your bin. You can either use the flat side like this one, or you can use the rounded side, or you have different shapes at your table. But just feel free to ask and I can get you a different shape if you're looking for one. And you can start just by using it like a stamp. So just layering as you work. You can use this side, same thing. Maybe do it like a corner so it's more triangled. Or maybe it's more like the stomach of a dragon. Or even I left these at your table, which is a popsicle stick with this cutout here. If you use that, you're just gonna start from the top and work your way down just by pressing it in. And you're using the left and the right side to create that texture. So right now I've got the first row. I'm gonna take the point and put that to the other point that I've already made as I move across. So very quickly, I've got those scales. And then there's another option. You can take a marble bag or something you find around fruit like this, which this is also available over near the pegboard. Place it on top wherever you want, and then just rub that down into the clay and pull it up. It's not as deep because it's a thin material, but it still gives you more of a snake-like texture, and that could work really well. If you wanted like boils or like bubbles or pimples, of course, you can just take little balls. Of course, you would also need to score and slip. So think of them just like moles or pimples. And cluster them, spread them out. And these aren't all the textures. There's plenty more. You can find some. Even if you have a piece of burlap here, and then take a tool to rub that in, you can then get that fabric-like texture. Just see what you have, what's around the classroom. If there's something else you need to bring in, you can bring it in. But this would be some ways of obtaining those textures. You can even take a plastic bag if your clay is soft enough, and you can crumple up that plastic bag and stamp it into it. You can make something like a harder piece of clay and let it dry out and stamp like holes into it like a ball. And if the clay was soft enough or this was harder, I can then use that and roll it in. And this is the same dryness, so it's not really gonna do anything. But I can create my own stamp, design with this and stamp. Or even the backside of a marker will give you something different. So just play around with your textures and your things like that. Don't worry about the foot right now. That I will talk later. But for now, work on adding any ears you have, any horns you might have, wings, all those different types of things. But this should help get you to a point that would work well for any of your pots or your monsters. All right.